things happen, and you have to accept them and you have to deal with them. Sometimes you don't have a choice, and sometimes it is okay to take as a human, as a person with a body that has limitations. You're going to have to sit with it, and you're going to have to deal with it.
Welcome to Cancer Talks, a podcast sharing personal stories of transformation from people whose lives have been touched by cancer. My name is Claire DeLaslo, and I'll be guiding today's conversation. Our guest this week is Morhaf Al Achkar, an author, researcher, and family physician with a PhD in education. Morhaf moved to the States after receiving his medical degree in his home city of Aleppo, Syria. In 2016, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Since his diagnosis, he has written 3 books, including Roads to Meaning and Resilience with Cancer, for which he conducted 39 interviews with people living with lung cancer. Hi, welcome to Cancer Talks. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'd like to start with just hearing a little bit about you, who you are and who you were before your cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, so my name is Morhaf Al Achkar. I am from Syria originally. I moved to the United States about 15 years ago. I was a physician, I was a university professor, and I used to live in Indiana at that time, 2016. And I had actually planned a move to Seattle, where I was looking forward to advancing my career as a researcher and as a family physician, as a professor at the university. In terms of outside career, my hobbies, I have enjoyed music, enjoyed playing the oud. I played it on and off for quite some time. I picked it up more recently, but I played it in the past every now and then. I enjoyed dancing as well. I was taking some Latin dancing classes and trying to get better with my moves.
I'm a dancer. Awesome.
Oh, great. Yeah, dancing is wonderful. It's a lot of fun, and I enjoyed my time in Indiana. I was busy, a lot of work. It was few years after finishing residency training, which is also a lot of work. I did that in Florida. So Indiana life was for me working, teaching, learning. I was also a PhD student as well. That's something I forgot to say. I was doing a PhD in education and research methodology. So I was spending my time reading, working, and sometimes partying, going out and having fun.
And then what was going on in your life when you received your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I was busy with all of the above. I would say probably in the year prior to the diagnosis, I was primarily busy with work and school. I had enjoyed school a lot, going back to be involved in a program of study in social sciences and philosophy of research. So that's the philosophy part was very close to my heart, was enjoying it quite a bit. So I would be, reading masterpieces of writings of first order philosophers like Hegel, Kant, and I was working. I was busy at work. Coming to the diagnosis, and I can share, that might be a curiosity of yours.
Yeah, definitely.
The time prior to the diagnosis, I had started feeling increasingly more tired and probably lost some weight. So I was noticing a change in how I look. And to work on that, I wanted to start exercising, and I hired a personal trainer. As we were working out together, I realized that I was becoming very short of breath. It was very hard for me to do like really basic, simple physical activity without panting and without running out of air. So that was probably Monday, Wednesday when I realized it, and on Friday I got an X-ray of my lungs and I realized that there's something abnormal in them. The left side was filled with fluid, or filled with something white or something blocking the whole view. So as a physician, I'm a family doctor, so I know this is not right. I went to the emergency room to get that looked at, whether it's pneumonia, whether it's fluid accumulation for whatever reason. And in the ER, they investigated that with imaging, with taking a sample of what turned out to be fluids around my lungs. There was about 3, 4, 5 liters of fluids that were taken out in the following couple of weeks. So when they sent that fluid to pathology, in the following week came back as cancer cells. So so that's an unusual diagnosis to receive at a young age, especially from what turned out to be lung cancer. It's usually lung cancer affects people at older ages, but it could affect anybody at any time, of course. But this is.
And you were how old?
I was 33 at that time.
Wow. And what stage was the cancer in when they found it?
It was stage 4. Yeah, stage 4. Yeah, by the time of diagnosis, it was stage 4. So it's a difficult diagnosis, of course, when you receive that, knowing that there's cancers around the lungs in the fluids immediately means stage 4. It kind of got out of the place where the cancer cells originated. And stage 4 with lung cancer is not a pleasant diagnosis to have, especially in the beginning, especially for someone not knowing much about what cutting edge research had been taking place in the field. And so initially it meant to me practically that I may not live more than a few months. So that was big. Turn out that this is 2016. I'm getting into my close to 5 years now, and I've been doing fairly well actually, thanks to the advances in treatment. Genetic testings really changed the landscape of cancers generally, but especially with lung cancer. Now you know that there are driver genes or driver mutations, genes that are, if set off, they initiate the development of the cancer and can then become targeted by particular treatment, chemotherapy that's specific to the cancer cells. So unlike traditional chemotherapy that comes to target cells that are reproducing fast, which kind of a characteristic of cancer cells, those targeted therapy work only on the cancer cells, or primarily on the cancer cells. So that's why I'm not beat up, although I've taken my chemotherapy this morning and I've taken it last night. So this becomes a pill that I take, actually 4 pills. 4 pills I take in the morning, 4 at night. And I've been able to maintain with pretty good quality of life. I'm probably more tired than before, but you find ways around it. I'm not working as much as before either, so I'm managing. I take a nap in the afternoon, and that helps me with my energy. So so that's kind of the story of the diagnosis and some of the physical implications.
How did it feel when you received the news about the diagnosis? What went on for you?
It was not something I expected. I knew it was serious from the way the doctor was dealing with it, and it was clear to me that he was prefacing something difficult to come. He was explaining things, showing me the X-ray and letting me know about this and that and the other. But I'm like, okay, well, take me to, take me to the heart of the matter. What is it? Just bring it in. And he brought it in with saying that there are cancer cells, and that immediately means a lot of things. It's to me, Feelings, I would say, it's you get into a state of confusion, because it comes at you, or it came at me. Let's kind of sit with it for a little bit. It came at me as something that's unexpected, so you're not prepared for it, and has huge implications on everything. You have, let's say, just to count five things. I had signed up for a new job, and I was moving to Seattle. Okay, well, now that's put on hold. I was finishing a PhD, and to continue and become a researcher. Well, now that's not going to happen. More important than that really become the relationships in my life, my family primarily. At that time I was single. I think I was dating. I had started seeing someone at that time, and we were just talking. But what was particularly important at a core level is the family in my life. So sharing that with them, what does that mean? What does that mean to them as the youngest, as their youngest brother? May not be living for very long. What does it mean to my dad to lose his son, the youngest one? What does it mean to me to not live for very long? We come with expectations that we're going to be alive for a while. So there were, as the questions are framed in that way, and they come not necessarily formulated in words. They come to you as notions, in a sense, as more like feelings, or more as intuitions about this is going to be off, this is going to be off, this is going to be out of the window, this is going to be difficult. So you feel overwhelmed, and overwhelmed to the extent you feel like, so what is this again? Is this a dream? Is this real? And is this dream? Is this real? If this is real, what is my feeling supposed to be? What is the feeling that I am having? Because it's an unusual, it's uncharted, it's a new. You're like a hit. Now you're gonna use, and now if I look back, I kind of start using metaphors. But you're hit with a bat on your head, and you're like, oh my gosh, or actually more like you hit by a truck on your head. So that's so what do you do with all that? It took me a few seconds of being in that. People call it shock, being overwhelmed, and then I cried. I cried, and I still cry when I cry, which is very interesting. Crying, to me, actually, part of it is, which is very, very interesting. I mean, sitting with a feeling is something I learned to do after, but I am more trained to be on the outside of the experience. As a clinician, as a person who comes to approach others. So it's, for me, even that's more exercised, more practiced. So it's more like me looking at myself from the outside and seeing how sad this situation is. It is when expectations are failed, not expectations, really more like hopes, because there's no promise. No one. We get into this life. I'm an atheist, agnostic. So we come to this life with no promises. We think that we're going to be living for very long. Well, but nobody told us so. And there are children who die at young age. So to assume that the person would be living is more of a holding on, a comforting feeling. But really, death is arbitrary, and life can be short for many people, and had been short for many people. We see the average. We see what happened commonly. But for the individual person, I had hopes to live long and live healthily. And those were failed badly, at least for that moment, from that vantage point. I was sitting with them being failed badly. So that's sad. That's sad. Less than anger is probably, and I'm glad anger came at times, but it came more because it's also a complex feeling. Anger comes when you're when you know you're not supposed to be angry, but you're angry, so you're angry that you're angry. Right? Because really,
Absolutely.
because like why are you in this my anger comes and like, why am I in this position? It's like, this is so
Yeah.
sad. I'm in this like really difficult position and I don't know how to handle it, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, and I'm frustrated, so I
Yeah.
get to be angry with that frustration. But generally, really, that feeling that came early on is sadness,
Yeah.
like tears. There's a loss. There's someone who's struggling, and I felt for that person. It also, and that's something. If you're talking about feelings, where did I get that? I also got it from the person who was in front of me. I had this very, very kind and gentle pulmonologist
Wow.
who was sitting in front of me. I'm the age of his kids, and he was sharing with me that diagnosis, and he was sharing it with a broken heart.
Wow.
As a
Yeah.
human, he was a human. He was dealing with, and I was his colleague in a sense. I actually worked at the same hospital with him. I was the age of his kids, and he was seeing a human who's struggling. So it was not hard for me to take also his attitude that there's something sad here.
Yeah.
And again, this is I'm making explicit some learning, because to me, and for some people will be like, why is he taking all this longer route to I mean, you're in it, just say that you were struggling, because I didn't know how to struggle, really. I mean,
Wow.
that's not
Yeah.
an experience that we're prepared for. You're taking cues from other experiences, and and that's constructing what you are going through at that time. So it's an almost like indirectly getting to yourself. You get to yourself through others.
And had you had the experience of giving someone else a cancer diagnosis or delivering the news as a physician?
I had given, trying to remember when those were. I had given diagnoses. Yes, definitely. I had given that. Even diagnoses also of HIV, for example, which is not similar. Although HIV is a chronic disease now, but the semblance to HIV is very big, especially for somebody who doesn't know about where the landscape of treatment of HIV
Yeah.
is, because you initially feel like, wow, this is that disease which has all the stigma and all the name, but
Yeah.
then you realize that actually you could live fairly well with the adjustments, with the treatment that's available.
Yeah. And of course, in delivering the news, you can't tell someone everything that's available before telling them that they have cancer. There's no way
Right.
to, yeah, prepare.
Yeah. Often primary care doctors are not the ones who deliver cancer news, though.
Right.
For example, if I'm concerned, I've shared concerns about cancer with patients. That's what's becoming more salient to
Yeah.
my mind. But like, you have this little finding on the images, and I'm really concerned about it. I need to send you somewhere because I'm worried that it could be cancer. So that's more the kind of conversations that I do,
Yeah.
and that's what's sticking to my mind more than I'm sorry to tell you that you have cancer.
But the value, it's come up, I think, twice just in this conversation. The value of knowing the landscape of medicine and what's possible is huge in the moment of diagnosis.
Absolutely, absolutely, and often, of course, you can't give all the information at once, and it is a key to deliver the information in a way that gives the seriousness to the person, name things as they are, allow the person to sit with them, and then move them forward. And I've talked to people, interviewed many people actually with cancer, probably over 50 so far in my research work on different projects. The moment of receiving the diagnosis is experiences are similar to what I described. The language is
Yeah.
similar, and sometimes people use language. For example, if somebody says, you got cancer, but it is treatable. So that's something that could potentially help the person. But at times the person doesn't hear it. They hear the word
Totally.
cancer and they just don't hear anything else. And that's been, I've been told that. So it's not like there is a, I'm sure there are ways that are better than others. For example, there are bad ways of telling about the diagnosis over the phone. That
Right.
probably should never be the case.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you got cancer, let's start working on your will, for example. That's terrible.
God. Yeah.
And giving things gradually to the person is probably good. If there are prospects of things potentially being under control, or interventions that can prolong survivorship, I think sharing those early on with a person so they can hold on to hope and
Yeah.
can potentially feel the burden lessened. I think those are some strategies that potentially can be used.
I mean, it reminds me of why we do this podcast. We have had many people come to the Zoom calls and share that having listened to other people's stories for some after a diagnosis, for some just after their family physician said you might have cancer. And, it's not instant. There's no way to have instant relief or making hearing your diagnosis easeful. But then in the time following, both the book that you wrote, Roads to Meaning and Resilience with Cancer, and also this podcast, just an effort to be telling stories so that when people receive the diagnosis, they can hear how other people are living with it and living through it.
Yeah, I do think that sharing stories is important for many reasons. Preparing people to similar experiences, coming to understand the struggle of a loved one, being more able to help someone or to be at the side of someone who is struggling, being curious about a human's experience. I think all those are relevant reasons for sharing stories.
I want to return to your story. You wrote a beautiful letter that I won't say by name because it has a very strong political bent, but you know which one I'm talking about. And many of the things you wrote in that letter are extremely salient beyond the political context in which you were writing. And you wrote that you felt when you were diagnosed, you lost your identity. And I was hearing you talk about people who are assuming they have decades to live and are maybe not, really doing what matters most to them in their life. But I hear your story, and it's like you were already doing what you were getting this PhD and having your practice, and you were like really living to the fullest, it sounds like. But you talk about this loss of identity. Could you share more about that?
Yeah, so the experience of illness is humbling because I had a job and I was taking care of patients. I was professor teaching others, and I was a student with an able body, going to classes and doing all that. And on the binaries of who has authority in the way that could potentially be looked at in a framework that gives privilege to the binary to one side or the other, I was on the privileged side. And I lost a lot of that. I couldn't work for some time because I needed to take care of myself. I was not teaching for the same time because I was managing the struggle physically and mentally. It was on a kind of on the spring break, so I did not miss a lot of school. But I got, my professors were kind to me to waive some expectations requirement. It was like, you got stage 4 lung cancer. What are you? Well, give me your final. Well, I'm gonna die, dude. So they were very kind at waiving expectations. So, but I'm on the receiving end of care and empathy after being, person who's fulfilled with providing care to others. So that shift is humbling, and it took a while for me to learn actually that one, you could be on the receiving end, and that's okay. You can be patient going to see doctors, and that's okay. They say doctors are the worst patients, so that's where it's kind of coming from, because it's hard to receive care from others.
Yeah.
You could be a person who's, you're not going to teach this time. They're still going to be fine without you. Others are going to do the job that you're doing. The world maybe doesn't need me exactly, because this others can cover for me, and that's okay. And then you learn to even push it more. It's like really that mindset that gives meaning from privileges, or gives meaning from being on the more privileged end on the binary. Is it even a sound mindset? Is this framework even valid? Like able, not able, or patient, caregiver, or the giver or receiver. You start seeing that no, actually, it was a privilege that I was walking around providing care, or others allowing me to give care and be with them in spaces where they're struggling. So they're opening their spaces to others. So the patient actually allows us to be close, allow us to be around and to give care. So there is that you start to see, first of all, that things happen, and you have to accept them as and you have to deal with them. Sometimes you don't have a choice, and sometimes it is okay to take as a human, as a person with a body that has limitations. You're going to have to sit with it, and you're going to have to deal with it, and to think that you're going to be able to do whatever you want for whenever you want, and that's false. So it's in all that, it is humbling. It's humbling, and it brings the person down to the ground. It's grounding in a sense as well. And those are some words that I learned to use early on. So then you start to that letter that I wrote was drawing comparison with a way of viewing oneself in a narcissistic way that sees the person to be superior to others, and allowing themselves to do this and that to other people, and to be not just dismissive, but really disregarding the essentially human in others, and only seeing themselves. Of course, I was not before in that space, and I hope I wasn't. And I've done things that wronged others. I'm always willing to apologize.
But we're all a little bit narcissistic. I mean, I think that you experienced it as a shift, being able to receive care. There's maybe a little piece of you that, I mean, narcissism is a strong word, but a piece of you who was, I'm in charge, I make my own decisions, I just work hard, excel, achieve, that control. There is a level of ego there that, I mean, I'm very guilty of as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for being kind and saying it this way. Yes, you're right. There is an ego. There is that hurt to narcissism, to scar to the narcissism that the person maintains. So that's in that, and again, just to give people the context and know what we're talking about. We're talking about around the elections, the previous election, 2016's election, and around the Syrian ban, and that was a letter to the president at that time, and it's published on the Huffington Post, so it's still there for people to look at it. So that was a turning point for me, in the sense that I could actually, by dialoguing with that absolute narcissist, I can actually call out some of those pathological attitudes that every person has if they can push to an extreme, and potentially shift my mindset to see that I can do better than that. I don't want to be like him, and I need to search. And actually, I think for me that was very important. That claim, I do not want to be in any way like that guy, has shifted a lot of my framework, and brought my attention to things that could be rooted in the ego, in the narcissism, in the person being centered on themselves and maintaining disregard to to others. So that was a key transformation during the experience of living with cancer. Again, I am dealing with cancer, and I could shift to become a little narcissist who's obsessed, number one, with surviving as a person, and then second, obsessed with my own struggle, angry that why did I get this? Well, but instead I had available to me, because I had conversations with many others. At first, I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people who are living with cancer, so it's not targeting me. And people do get cancer, so as a physician, I can see that. So I'm not entitled to that position. Second, in the conversation, I realized that other people are also struggling, so there is maybe a space for people to do things together, for people to help one another. And because my energy is limited, and that was good in a sense. That saved me from coming to be that savior who wants to help this and help that, and get into those spaces where how can I save as many as possible, which is good. I mean, the attitude is good, but again, if put on steroid, especially among some of those who after their illness they start becoming fanatics with kind of religious spells that make the person feel like this came to me for a reason, so I can be transformed and then transform others. But I think it's useful for people to and I remind that myself with that. We can be more humble in terms of the impact the person can leave on Earth, and we can give it our best shot. But I don't think we need another Messiah, and I don't think we need other prophets.
Yeah, it makes me wonder when and how. Like, is there a moment that you mark in your journey where you decided to surrender, or decided that you would enter this space of vulnerability, and how did you choose that?
I didn't choose it. I was shoved into it. Really. I was in the emergency room, and inside the room, at the attending, I saw outside one of my interns. He's like, "Hello, are you okay?" I'm like, "I don't know if I'm okay." And I actually turned out that I'm not okay. And I was struggling I wanted, because of my attitude, I care for him, and I have responsibility. I lead the team, and I'm responsible for his education. I'm his mentor. I wanted to tell him that I'm okay, just like, in that attitude of care, just to reassure him so he's not worried. But I didn't have that available to me. So that vulnerability, I had to sit with that. I would, for times after times, I would be moved around in the hospital on stretches, and I'm wearing those gowns. And I don't know if you've seen those gowns. Those gowns are they expose more than they cover. Really. They have this little thing, like you tie them from behind, but really try to walk behind somebody in those gowns. I mean, you literally see everything. I mean, that's so that's ultimate exposure. And then I have difficult days with fatigue, and sometimes not. If I don't get enough sleep, I'm cranky, and that's just, I have no choice. It's not. I mean, like, if you take one night of my sleep, I'm cranky in the morning, and there's nothing to do. It's not like I did not get good sleep. Go back to sleep. I can't get back to sleep when it comes to 8 in the morning. So I'm stuck with this space, and I'm stuck in that exposure. I'm stuck in that. It's not like I am going to enter a space of vulnerability because it's so beautiful. I'm like, get in. Okay, now what are we going to do? Okay, well, be vulnerable. Okay, well, I'm going to be vulnerable. What else am I going to do?
Yeah. But I do hear, in the way that you talk about not fighting death or not holding on to your life, I think there's some choice in there.
I fight death. I hate death.
You do fight death.
Oh, yeah. I want to stay alive. I want to live for another 50 years. I have a lot of things to do, so I'm gonna fight death.
Okay.
I say fight death in a more of in a silly way. Like, you can't fight. I mean, you can fight death, but you can't really fight death. That's the kind of, you can do what you can in terms of maintaining your health and doing this and that and that. And there are some things that, taking your medicine and etc., and keeping an attitude for living. But it's really not all. It's not a choice. I mean, like, I'm going to
Yeah.
If death comes, I'm just like, well, it comes. I'm a part of me is a body. If you can choose to say that I'm a body and a self or a soul or a person. I'm a person in a body. That's one, that kind of the dual. Even if within that framework, that body part has its own rules, so you can do
Yeah.
whatever. If you don't want it to be stuck in that dualism, you are that body and you follow the rules of nature. I want to live, and I'm not one of those who's like, oh, bring it in, I'm good. No, I'm not. I have done. I'm in a stage of my life. I've published 2 books on resilience, meaning, one book on resilience, meaning, and the third on authenticity, and the second on authenticity, third on love. I feel like I've done. I wrote my memoir, so I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm ready. If someone, many people would in their lifetime would achieve something similar to what I have achieved so far. At least, let's say, in terms of leaving a legacy. I mean, I didn't leave impact. Like, probably left impact more than some people, far less than many other people. And that's something everyone's going to be measured by that. And a lot of luck plays part in this. And our impact is not ending with our death. We leave traces in life, and there's
Absolutely.
also a butterfly effect, and people would take your stories and share it. So I don't I this question worries me, but I doesn't stop me from living, and doesn't make me hold on in a pathetic way onto things. But I enjoy life. So that's what I said. I've done some of the big things that I wanted to do, and now I'm enjoying living, actually, and I'm enjoying living, pacing myself at it. I'm writing an album,
Nice.
learning to write songs, and I look at the horizon at things, and I enjoy living. I enjoy the breath that I take.
So I wanted to talk about Cancer Talks, our work here, having interviews with people who've been touched by cancer in some way. And you wrote this book with 39 interviews. One question I have as someone who did a similar practice of speaking to people with cancer is how you emotionally prepared going in. I'm just curious to hear about your process, because it's a similar thing that we're doing.
It was part of a research work that attempted to understand the experiences of people living with advanced lung cancer. So the questions, similar to actually what you did today, life before cancer, getting to know about the person, their day-to-day life, who they are, their jobs, friends, family, and then moving to the cancer diagnosis, that path, symptoms, and there's some medical stuff in there, like what symptoms came first, what happened, how did you feel about it, how was the diagnosis received, etc. Moving to the treatment, moving then to what the person doing besides taking medication to maintain control and live healthily. And then that let me branch out to how they find strength and how they find meaning, which are the answers to those 2 specific questions became the whole book. Like, probably I would say 10% or even less than 10% of the conversation about meaning and resilience that led to the book.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of data. But then moving to how life is different after now compared to before, and then zooming in on aspects of life, for example, the relationship with others, how did it change and shift around before and after. Then talking about unmet needs and things, if given to the person, make their life and quality of life better. The methodology was designed to be a follow-up study. So the first part is what I explained to you, and then going back to people a year after and asking them, since last time we talked, how is your cancer experience, treatment, where you are with that, how are you coping, how are you dealing, how are you finding meaning and strength. So following up, and then how are relationships and impact also. We zoomed in on specific topic, for example, experiences with the oncologist, the impact, finances, etc. all those specific things, we zoom in with more concrete question. We ended with also unmet needs, and we talked particularly about death and dying in the second interview. They were difficult. Interviews were very difficult, especially with people who are not doing well in the second time. The first time, when people are sharing the diagnosis, it was sometimes it was very triggering to me. We had the symptoms and went to the cancer doctor, and this is what they said. And the person started crying, and I'm like, my heart is breaking. And then they were saying about the losses and what they changed and things that they're doing differently, and that was very hard to me as well. How did I deal with it? I don't think I dealt with it well. It was I had an urgency to do it quickly, so I actually would finish an interview. Sometimes I would do another interview the same day, and then I realized that was really, really taxing and tiring. So I would, do at least 2 or 3 days to recover. Even my oncologist actually was worried about me. He's like, you're really getting into the weeds with this difficult experience. You're traumatizing yourself over and over and over and over. I think, speaking about resiliency, this exposure probably liberated me. So now I'm comfortable listening and talking about it more than probably the average person, because I've been exposed to it. But still, it's difficult. For example, the project of death and dying, we do it on Tuesday usually with the team. And I'm like, oh, this is hard. Can we break it apart into spreading it more, so I'm not like feeling really down. Those are difficult things, and people would see the end product, but it took labor. It took emotional labor. It took physical. It's not physical labor. I'm sitting in the same place, but in a sense of I'm dragging at times. Some good practices, again, pacing oneself, not doing it at the same time, having someone to talk. My partner at that time carried some of that burden, and I confess that it probably even affected the relationship, because I'm struggling and I'm reactivating my struggles, and I'm like, at the end of the interview, I'm like staring and looking in the space because of all the new questions that are being asked with where the person is doing, and especially meeting people. There's some really difficult ones. There were times when I emailed a person to invite them to participate, and the person who responded was their wife, saying that so and so is no longer with us and had died. There were times when I scheduled an interview with somebody a week after, and she died the week before. Wow. I talked to people who were saying that they were not doing well, and now I'm actually afraid of checking to see, are they okay or not okay now, because for me now they're there, or they had been there. Are they there now? I don't know, but I am avoiding going to know, because it's just another. It's gonna be hard, another grief to go through. Oh, one other thing that I actually learned to do is I call it mastering the art of grief, which is just it's very difficult. It's not easy to master, but I've developed strategy, and I can share with you some. And when you're dealing with a difficult situation like this, like a loss like that, I've done it using music, and I've done it using my my thought, my conversations with others. So you need somebody else, or you need to be engaging. You need a space so you can actually play around and move around with your emotional space. So I would sit with the emotion. I would recognize that this is really sad. So if I'm playing the music, my oud, I will play a very sad note. I will let myself play the music. I will come as a sad note. But then I would, if I'm thinking or I'm playing, I would start shifting to places that are more sweet, more pleasant. For example, if I'm remembering, if there's a death, I'm remembering the sweet things about that person. I'm remembering good memories. If I'm playing tunes, I'm playing the tunes that are more soothing to my soul. So I moved out of that very difficult space into a space that's soothing.
Wow.
But then, as you're remembering that sweetness of the person, you're going to feel sad. You're going to
Yeah.
feel sad because you've lost that sweetness, because that
Yeah.
sweetness is no longer there, and it's lost for you, lost for those who experience and encounter that sweetness, including the person themselves. So my music's going to shift back again to sadness, to present that missing of that sweet and
Wow.
that beauty that's there. And I will sit with that feeling for a while. I'll talk about it. There will be tears with that as well. And then after that, I would move to another space of, it's not necessarily sweetness, but more like humor. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but they were annoying. They were like, you're sad for them and you're crying, but remember that time when they did this and that for you and pissed you off. Or something like really quirky in them. There's something human in
Wow.
them.
Amazing. Yeah.
So you would laugh, just like what you and I now we laughed at it, and I would play some a tune become more silly, or more convey that humor start to play in this. So this is different from the smile of enjoying the sweetness and the joy
Yeah.
and the connection, the connectedness, to a laughter that has to do with the irony of the human existence, or humor, or something silly, or something that's like really. So then you moved back again to sit with the fact that you're going through these phases. You're going from the grief, the sadness, the loss, the mix of feelings, to the sweetness, to back to the sadness, to seeing the human. And you recognize that the person who actually let you encounter them at all those levels, and the person that allows that you feeling their presence and their absence, this
Yeah.
is loving. This is a
This is
person who
loving.
allowed you to love
Yeah.
them, allow you to connect with them. So you become in a space of potentially of a gratitude for that person,
Yeah.
because they came into your life. You start flirting with peace, with them and with their memory, and with the whole mix of feelings that are now more organized between sadness and some anger, some confusion, some frustration, to some sweetness, to some sadness, to some silliness. So all those together, they have spaces. They are
And then,
on the
but all
shelf,
connected. Yeah.
but they're all connected.
They all come together and they're connected through the music. And
Exactly.
then also that you can still love them.
Absolutely.
Your ability to love them actually is, of course, it's different without being there with their body and your body, but yeah, the love and the gratitude doesn't go anywhere.
Absolutely, and it's gratitude to them. I'm very particular with using the word gratitude, because some people kind of kind of like shove it in your face, as in
Yeah.
be grateful
Yeah,
to
yeah,
this
yeah.
or to that supreme being, or to life for being alive, or like look at the glass full. That's nonsense. Gratitude for me is to the other person, is to the human who graced me with their presence, who are there with me, and who they owe me nothing for being there. They just chose to be there, chose to allow me to encounter them. For that, I am grateful, and of course, I'm grateful for the opportunity. If you want to broaden that to grateful for the chance that I have met them, that's also appropriate. But I have to. Gratitude for me has to be concrete, has to be specifically linked with that. So developing the capacity to grieve helped me a lot. That came after the project, not before. It came
Right.
through my work with death, though, because a lot of people have showed me, when I interviewed them, showed me that they are at different stages in that process. So in my
Yeah.
mind, it became explicitly clear that there is a process that I, for myself, as I started to encounter death more and more, I had to develop it in order for me to survive. I had to develop it in order for me to fall in love. Now I'm developing this bond, this very deep bond with this woman in my life, and I love her to death, and I want to continue to love her to death, in a sense, and I mean it. I love her to death in the sense that being willing to really feeling like my life would be shattered without her. At the same time, recognizing that our life is fragile, our relationships are fragile. She's an autonomous, independent person who can the next day say, adios,
Yeah.
I'm done. So what am I going to do? I'm going to die, but I'm going to come back. I mean, I don't know. But you see the point that
Yeah.
I'm saying here. It's,
Yeah.
it's difficult to envision what next. But again, to develop healthy attachment of the kind that's intimate, that takes you whole, that connects you through all yourself. You need to learn how to also grieve that person and allow that
Absolutely.
master how you come out in a way that in a sense that keep that bond sacred, respect that bond, not like trash it. Oh, it was all not worth it, or it was all bad, or they actually were mean to me. Or that's nonsense, and we can't say that to those who we loved. So a healthy grief comes to foster healthy attachment that the person is capable of developing now. So my life is not about the past only. I've lost people. I lost my mom. I lost my sister. I can't live my life only remembering previous memories and previous experiences. I need to form newer attachments. I need to find friends. I need to find people I love. I need to maintain those relationships and protect them. And the way to do that is by being also ready to lose them and
To
having
grieve. Yeah.
to grieve.
And I think about cancer as, for many people, an invitation to grieve or an invitation to develop a relationship with loss. And sometimes you develop the relationship and then you get to keep living. Sometimes you develop the relationship and it's the end. But yeah.
Exactly. Developing a relationship with grief, but not necessarily living a life of grief.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No. But as someone raised in America, I was not taught how to grieve. I was not taught a relationship with death. The will that you referenced. I think of hospitals. I think of life support. But that's kind of all I was given in terms of my relationship with death. And there's a lot more.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's having a space to encounter loss and encounter death, then I believe allows the person to come back with full force to live. And for me, that's in the end what matters. Some people might actually end up, having very little space for death, and they're just living.
Yeah.
And I say, good for them.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, you're in the end, you deal with it when you have to, and that's perfectly fine. Unfortunately, not all of us have that privilege. Some are forced to. You lose a loved one here and there, and you have to deal with it. So you have to develop that capacity. Otherwise, you'll be broken.
I wonder about this urgency you referenced in doing the interviews, and your oncologist was noticing that was a lot to take on. And then I also think about a moment in your book where you write that you wanted to discover the thing that you, and only you, in a sense, could offer to the world. So I'd just love to hear in your own words how that interview project and that book writing with the 39 people living with cancer, both what you decided it was that you should do and then that experience of urgency. And
So I was living at that time without knowing how long I would live. The treatment, the medicine that I was on first, was better than chemotherapy, but you would last for about 11, 13 months on average. So I was diagnosed November 2016. Give it a year. That's November 2017. And average people would fail then. Give a chemotherapy, it would keep me alive for 4 or 5 months more, and then I would die. Chemotherapy is a life of struggle. So I was doing fairly okay, but realistically, I didn't know if I would be okay more than few months. So imagine having 5 or 6 months. What do you want to do? I'm interviewing people, or I have interviewed people, and I need to do a project. 4 or 5 months you can do a project. So after I interviewed people, the first project that I had urgency to do was to write about the unmet needs of these people. Unmet needs in a sense, how can we make their lives better? And I felt if I do that, that's the most urgent thing, because I have the data. No one's hearing the voices of those people. I need to do this. So I felt that I needed to do the work so I can write out how we can help the people and support them. After I did that, I thought I could write for these people how they can see options and have choices. I've encountered them, I know them, I also know myself, and I can see the ranges of options that became available to me as I encountered them. I also know that I am a physician, I'm a researcher, I'm a
Yeah.
patient now, so I have perspectives not a lot of people have. So from that
Absolutely.
vantage point, I thought putting out organizing the story, constructing it in a way that every person can see options and choices becomes something that I could and I need to participate in. Again, here my horizon is not necessarily expanding. I mean, I survived 5, 6 months, 10 months, whatever, but that means still the shoe could drop any time, and
Yeah.
that means another few months. And so I finished that book with urgency to get it out. Then the same thing with being authentic. The third one, I wrote it in 14 days, and similarly in my memoir.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, again, the same idea is that I need to put it out. I've been deferring this. I've wanted to write my memoir so many times, and I tried, and I couldn't do it. Okay, well, if I keep trying, if I don't do it, get it done and move on. So I did that, and I got it written, the first draft, 14 days, published in about 6 months with all the rounds of edit. Same thing. The third book probably was around the same time in terms of writing and editing, and those a book lasted me about 6 months from starting the writing to getting it to production or getting it out. That's kind of I'm setting that as a timeline for myself. So that's what living for urgency in the sense.
Yeah.
I can't spend my lifetime doing this because again I don't know how long I will live. You asked me a second question that I wanted to comment on. The one that only I can contribute to, is
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I still don't know what that is, actually. I still don't know what that is, but that's definitely in my mind. I want, of course, part of my job is I work and I make living and I need health insurance. And I know I'm a healthcare provider, I'm a doctor, and I know that I provide care. Probably other people can substitute for me. And I would say that is the case in a lot of spaces at work. I provide sets of skills that other people can actually do, but I am looking, and I'm always investigating to find that work that I and only I can do. I think the work around love is I leveraged a vantage point that not a lot of people have, and I leveraged a moment in my own development of thinking. So it has something that's particularly unique to me, but I'm sure it's with other people. Again, what I've developed is a capacity to make explicit what I do and perform and in my life, and by using language
Yeah.
to describe and to make sense of an experience, or to write out what is being done or what I do, to put words for experiences. That's something
I
I've
see you
become,
doing that. Yeah.
yeah, I become good at it.
Yeah.
So then I'm trying to tackle bigger questions. So for example, the question of love is a big one, actually, and
Huge.
I think the work that I did is reasonably good, at least I think so. So in a sense, if you can actually, the idea, the premise, and that's in the I'm leaving it in the judgment of others. If somebody says, I'm going to operationalize for people the notion of living with love so they can give it
Yeah.
more effectively and more efficiently, and they can do it next time, and they can receive it from others who are also doing it more. Imagine people giving more love to each other after they master that capacity.
Yeah.
That's really good. I mean, people worked hard on this subject. If what I actually put out help people in that direction, that in itself can be worthy of a lifetime.
Absolutely.
And I wrote that explicitly in my book. So then it's a matter of judgment. People would read it, would find it useful. People would apply it. There's some learning as well. I mean, this is not the kind of book that you would read once and you throw on the shelf.
Yeah.
This is a book that this is a manual in a sense that you have to practice, you have to read and reread, you have to look again at, because it reads just like anything we learn. It requires practicing for the person to master. But if I have put out something that potentially cracked the code, that's really worth it. So then what's next? I have a lot of bigger projects that seem like more dreamy than anything else because I have not done them and seem like, and I'm happy to share just in the spirit of being vulnerable, because now I'm sharing how how unrealistic, so how kind of ideas that come to the person's mind, and how, if you come in a year from now, you're going to see that many of them I probably have not done. I'm working on music, and lyrics or poetry are essential to our existence. I want people to have the capacity to express in a tangible way, whether that's I don't do art, I don't know much about art, but in a sense, in a musical way, or in a linguistic way, in a written way. And I want to master the capacity and write it down for myself in a manualized way, that this is how you develop an idea, this is how you moved from an experience to an idea, this is how you moved from an idea to a developed idea, this is how you moved from developed idea to a beautiful idea, this is how you move from a beautiful idea to an idea that you can actually dance with too, and you can repeat in your mind, so it can shape what you do and how you experience the world. This is what you described. You get an album that you listen to for a year, because that becomes more like the roadmap, or becomes like the blueprint of how you're living. It shapes that. But what if that idea for that album actually from you? They're from you as an aspirational you, in a sense, you as you like yourself. I shared with you, for example, about love. In moments, I wrote songs about my beloved person, beloved lady, and those songs, as I repeat them later, they come to remind me of how I want to love this person. So they become a guide for me through that experience. Imagine writing your lyrics in a way that you feel you actually appreciate them poetically, appreciate them musically, and they are at a level that resemble or close to what people who are doing this professionally are doing it. So imagine turning it, allowing the poet in every person, or the musician in every one of us, to express and to participate. I do. We talked earlier about prophets, and that we don't need another prophet. We need everyone to participate, though. We need everyone to become a prophet, in a sense. Everybody bringing their wisdom, developing their wisdom, cultivating it, elevating it, refining it, purifying it, beautifying it, developing its form, developing its shape, developing its carrier, so they can. And you see how many layers of this? Imagine a person who's speaking imagine our conversation now. We're sitting on like a smaller section of it, or like a very little component of it, and we're working hard and refining it. It becomes something that we can share with others, and this is really what art is. You have people who are at least in my position, that's how I operationalize it. Of course, you have those who have developed that capacity and mastery with practice, who can do it very quickly, very efficiently, and they can speak almost like take them a few rounds, and their first trial is way better than my 10th trial. But the first trial is 5 times better than my 10th trial. Okay, what if I work, or somebody can guide me, so I can work and try 10 times? What if even I get help, so I can try even 15 more times? Then I will come to develop a work that is potentially, that can be enjoyable to a circle of people. and that can turn me from a passive consumer to a lot of nonsense that's out to something that's meaningful for me, meaningful to the group that I am in.
Yeah.
That's for me is very, very important, and that is a project if those codes can be cracked and given to people. So I think there is a role for one. This is what the work that I'm doing, mastering the capacity to elevate expressions from a day-to-day level of day-to-day conversation of what you would say when I say, what do you want? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing? What is it like? You're going to say a few words, elevating that to something that can be experienced experienced poetically, with support from tools that are available to the person, or even without, by helping the person develop some capacities so they can master the tools that help them to move from one level to the next, with the level again of editing, purifying, beautifying, etc., as I named them. So that's the project that I'm working on myself. I'm working on it on my own album, and I'm hoping as I'm doing that I am learning tools that then I'll be able to share with others, so everyone can do their own thing.
Yeah, I think it's not the same, but I think there's a connection between even just the act of your interviews with all those people and our interviews on the podcast. It's maybe one step in that elevation of everyone can, I don't know if profit is the best word, but that everyone's voice, everyone, that we need everyone to participate in whatever this is that we're doing. But yeah, inviting participation, and that context for its focus, its dialogue, and also in the dialogue, there's maybe one level of that elevation happening with the focus that we can bring to the context of the interview, with the questions, with the meditation and reflection that happens before the conversation. Yeah, I think that in some way, this podcasting work and your book are at least kindred to that work you're thinking of elevating people's artistic voices.
Right, yes, the sharing your story. You have something to say. This is my friend I lost to cancer, Emmanuel Standifer, would say, I got something to say. Everyone got something to say. He said he started his own podcast, and that's a powerful statement, very powerful statement. Everyone got something to say. The books, the voices that you're saying. In being authentic, I am pushing that more. Sit with yourself. Here's a manual. I wrote my Being Authentic as a manualized biography, in a sense. If you want to write it, this is what you do. And I'm showing you examples of how you can write yours. And I'm writing it so I can invite you to write yours.
Wow,
Sit
nice.
with your story, construct your story so you can know who you are, know what you want, and look at the future so you can move forward. With love, you're coming to recognize the other, and you're coming to do things for the others, and you're coming to bring your participation, not just so you can express and tell what you got to say, but also everyone got something to say that's meaningful for someone else. I would qualify what my friend Emmanuel said.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we want people to say, and we want them to say it in a way that actually can be meaningful for others, with care, with love. There's a lot of nonsense rhetoric and sentiments out there of people who I wish they speak less. But I think I wish they speak less because they care less for the other. They're just many of them are narcissistically full of themselves, and they think what they say is meaningful, but it's all rubbish. And I think that's, for those people, I would say, we got enough of you. We want space to be open to others.
I want to ask, because this title, Roads to Meaning and Resilience, you're not the first person where resilience and cancer, it often comes up in the cancer journey. But I think it's sometimes hard to define what resilience is. What do you think of as resilience? And then maybe a second question is, how do you cultivate resilience?
Yeah, well, those are really good questions. We're born babies, we're weak, we're dependent on others. Then we learn through exposures and through experiences, and we become more capable of doing things. And then there are some, challenges that come to us that with practice and with exercise, we develop capacity to face them. And some people who are exercised and exposed could actually face difficult challenges, and they come out of it whole. In a sense, they're not broken, they're not scarred. I call those resilient people. Resilient in the sense that you enter a challenge, you leave it, you're yourself, or you're more capable of facing other challenges. Sometimes some of those challenges come to the person and they're not prepared for them. And then as those challenges come, they get into a state of a crisis. They put their energy together, they put their mind with help from others. They become capable of dealing with them. So resiliency is a notion that refers to the ability to dealing, managing, and carrying through difficult life challenges that would happen to many of us, especially, and often the tests are those really difficult ones. Everybody can get out of the house and cross the streets, right? That's a challenge. It's not very difficult of a challenge, but not a lot of people can do some of the bigger ones, in a sense. Maintaining compose when things going out of control, or seeing atrocities and navigating through it, and even guiding others through that, or losing major parts of one's identity and then reconstructing. So that's what I mean by resiliency, in a sense, ability to carry through.
Yeah, in reading your book, I remember the phrase doing everything you can comes up, right? Because that's like a common response to the diagnosis, is how are you getting through it? Well, I'm just doing everything I can. And something that came through in all the interviews you did is the pressure that comes with that, and the way that it can add anxiety to the experience of cancer, which makes me think also of the warrior mentality, the cancer survivor. And I guess in hearing you talk about resilience, I think there's one way you can hear that definition of resilience, which is about a sort of brute force, I'm going to do everything, get through it, warrior. But maybe I don't think that has to be what resilience is. And I'm wondering, I don't think that's necessarily what you were saying. It's not exactly about being fighting through. Is resilience the same as fighting, I guess, maybe, is my question?
No, I don't think resiliency is the same as fighting. And I view potentially people resiliency is learning. Learning to that's the closest that I can say. Learning from and to deal with difficult challenges. That's simply how I view it. You got difficult challenges, you learn from them, you learn to deal with them, and learn to deal with them means you're cultivating yourself so you can stand and you can manage better. You can learn from them as well, because that becomes also a context, becomes a stimuli, becomes an experience that you're engaging in, and you're changing how you do things around them. Resiliency is by essence a learned capacity to manage and to deal with challenges, and it comes through learning, it comes through engaging with the matter. How do you cultivate it? As I said, there's a lot of ways. Coming to things, not avoiding the subject, not avoiding the challenge, but taking breaks at times, that's okay. Getting adaptation, facing it, breaking it down, breaking the challenge to smaller pieces where you can manage a certain individual part, developing conceptualization of it so you can understand it better, so you can having a language so you can dialogue with it, you can think about it. Ideally, you can, hopefully, people coming to those experiences have learned from previous life, facing challenges and strengthening one's ability or abilities. Life experiences are complex, hyper complex, and a person to come to face them, they need to develop sets of generic skills to be more able to do them. I'll share with you just one example. I mean, I play music, and that helped me a lot to deal with things, and that gave me an outlet. Recently, I fell in love, and to manage the emotions that come with it, I needed to learn to write poetry, and that helped me a lot. So this is that experience is a challenge for me, that I felt I needed a language, or needed a language,
Yeah.
I needed tool, and I needed linguistic tools, so I can express, so that ambiguous or that vague experience that comes, or that experience that comes, that you feel it in all your parts, that you sense it in all your existence. You need to put it in words so you can deal with it in pieces, so you can manage it, so you can negotiate it, so you can talk about it. So poetry writing becomes a tool
Yeah.
to deal with it.
It makes me think of how I use music. I often turn to music, and my way of listening is usually an album for maybe a whole year that I'll listen to over and over and over again. And I journal a little bit, but I more often use music and the lyrics as that linguistic tool for myself. It's other people's words, but it's, yeah, replaying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last thought I have about resilience is the role of community and family in your own life. Because I think so far the version of your story I've gotten, I hear abstractly you becoming a patient after being a doctor, but I haven't heard, and I hear that the family, it was really hard and sad to tell your family about your diagnosis, but I have this, like, you wandering through the journey almost on your own with your music and your philosophy. And so I'm curious about the people around you and your community.
Yes, that's a very good question. Family, of course, are core, and from the moment of sharing a diagnosis to them to navigating the illness to getting tests and sharing with them. I had early on lived by myself, and I was in a relationship. I was engaged. I had a partner for some time,
Wow.
and then I became single again, and now I'm dating again. So you got the family side, you got the intimacy space, and you got then the broader community space. In family, we're not in the same geographic location. Like I said, I'm an immigrant from Syria, so my family were in different cities or different states, different countries. So the interactions were more of visitation, and those time become really quality time. I remember a trip I did to the UK. It was a 3 days trip,
Wow.
and I spent time with four of my siblings there. I spent probably 3 to 4 hours with each person, and that's it. And then I came back.
Yeah.
It's tight schedule, tight timeline, and it was an intentional trip for particular reasons. But regardless, that you might not spend long hours, but each minute actually becomes something that you remember, and I can recount conversations. Wedding, for example, my nephew got married 2 years ago. That's where all my family got together. That's a very memorable moment. So living experiences with family become more intense, become more intentional. You
Yeah.
definitely, the illness brought us closer. In the intimacy space, that's its own, you know navigating, wanting to be in a relationship or being single, the same questions that a person, any adult, actually deal with. You're still facing as a person with cancer. Everybody wants love. Everybody has the capacity to love, and I think that's in my most recent shift. And that's where I wrote the book called Love Attempt, and after that I fell in love. In the
Wow.
in that book, In that book, I emphasize a really important notion that we all have the capacity to love. We all have been loved before. We can learn how to love, and it's good to just start loving. Start loving or living with love means in any interaction, since this is a momentary thing, this is something I will do now in a dialogue with someone else, any other person. This is not talking about romance, not talking about this. Living with love means while a person is interacting with the other, being mindful of what the other person wants, wishes, and putting efforts to prioritizing that over the person's own desires and wishes. So it's simple, but it's really the essence of it. So if you're thinking of, I was going to ask you that question in a more of a kind of a rhetorical way. If you're thinking of those who loved you, you're likely to name things that they've done for you. They've done so you can be happy, purely so you can be happy. So with that, and it's any act that they're doing for you and for them. If you're like, okay, well, that was for both of us, but things that they did for you only, that's what people really remember as love. They did because they love me, and they did it, and in that I felt loved because the person is giving me that. It's for me. It's not so they can get something back. And I learned, I developed that notion, and I started practicing it in the sense of listening and asking myself, what does that person say? What does that person want? And having that cognizant, in a sense, I'm recognizing the other, I'm seeing the other, I'm paying attention to what the other person wants at this particular moment. Not just a generic, what does a human being want? But at this specific moment, and then acting, in a sense, doing things for the other person, intentionally for the other person, to make the other person happy in this moment, and not all in the broad generic formula. And then when I am developing and growing to become my own authentic self, I'm mindful also of being authentic with love. In a sense, I'm not just for me, but also to become more capable of loving someone else and loving the other person that I am interacting with. So I developed those notions, and they came because I really felt that in that framework of living, when I live and I am mindful and I'm loving the other person, it's so beautiful. It's just amazing, and especially amazing when it happened actually both sides. When you're encountering the other and you have intentionally come to the space to give and to do for the other person what they want, only to realize at the end of that interaction that the other person actually had come to that space to do exactly that for you, to give you. So every person is obsessed to do for the other person what the other want, and the other want doing for. So that reciprocal act of love is just beauty manifesting. I call that beauty manifest. So and when I experienced that, I wanted it, and I sought it, and I sought to live with love and to find a person who I could experience that with, who I can encounter that with. So then I'm learning how to love. Then becomes the challenge for me after finding a relationship is really learning to accept love and to take that from someone else, which is not. Which is something I have not written about it, anything, so I'm kind of going through an uncharted territory for me.
Love,
So that's where it is. So I'm a person who was diagnosed with cancer, is diagnosed with cancer. I'm still a person, and I'll continue to be a person. I don't know how long I will live. I want to live until I'm 88, and I have a lot of project to do in my lifetime, and I'm enjoying life. So I'll keep living, doing what I'm doing until I can't do it anymore.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. Cancer Talks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. Go to cancertalks.com/mystory to join the conversation. If you're moved to donate, please visit patreon.com/cancertalks. This podcast was produced by me, Annie Mernigan, and Cheryl Buck, with editing and original music by Annie Mernigan. I want to extend a special thanks to our donors, friends, and volunteers. We couldn't do this without you.